information. So next we have Dan Aubrey, who's the Compliance Manager of Horticultural, Food and Dairy at AsureQuality. Dan's the Compliance Manager of the Food and Dairy Service Unit. He leads the technical teams specialising in the audit of food safety, organics, environmental, quality and various ISO, Global Food Safety Initiative and third-party schemes. So welcome to the seminar, Dan, and Dan will be talking to us about the increasing demands of food safety auditors. Thanks, Dan.
Excellent. Okay, so you can see my screen okay there?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Daniel toku ingoa, ko Aoki toku manga, ko aha taui aho, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Yes, as introduced, I'm Dan Aubrey, Compliance Manager of AsureQuality, looking after the sort of the bulk of our auditors in the food safety space. Today I'll be talking to the increasing demands of food safety auditors, the additional tasks that we're giving them on top of what you would usually consider food safety. But as you're probably all aware, today's consumers are very well informed. They've got greater and greater demand for more assurances for their food to ensure it fits their needs. Their needs are forever changing and different as well. People checking labels a lot more. They're on a lot different health diets and fad diets and have religious needs, etc. And so these assurances that we offer are far more now than just the traditional food safety. And then this demand obviously drives a lot of innovation with producers. They're competing with each other to better meet their consumers' needs, and then obviously needing more assurance products from us to be able to vouch for those products, demonstrate that they do meet those needs. So during this webinar, I'll sort of talk to this evolving food assurance landscape, and I'll use AsureQuality as an example to illustrate what sort of a food safety auditor traditionally looks like and the agency, and then obviously how this landscape is impacting on that. And then at the end, I'll probably more asking questions of the attendees rather than answering questions. I would really have loved to have had this in person, present my presentation, and then spend the evening running around trying to build up some networks and try and get some solutions for what I'm going to be talking about today. Right, so just a bit of a scene set for those that don't know AsureQuality. We're based in New Zealand, but we do work internationally. And New Zealand has got a very strong reputation for producing really safe, sustainably produced products. And AsureQuality work very hard in the background with those producers to try and lock that in and protect that trust through our assurance certification, effectively vouching for these products using our brand. Our core service is within food assurance, certification, inspection, testing and training. We have 17 staff members across 100 locations within New Zealand, working right across the sort of food and primary sectors and right across the supply chain too. And we also have a growing international footprint with our joint venture Vero Veritas across Asia and Australia. So with this changing landscape, we've recently enriched our name. So for those that are aware of our history, we're originally part of MAF, part of the delivery service for doing audits, sort of the minimum regulatory food safety type audits. Our organisation has evolved quite a way from that. We've grown in what we do. And we're enriching our name where we're considering, well, what sort of terminology could we use? So we're no longer just food police, we're so much more than that. And we thought this kaitiaki kai, guardians of food, I think it's really powerful and aligns very well with where we are now and our role in the food sector. So no longer food police, but really working alongside the sectors now with a lot more assurances, a lot more support, allowing innovation, enabling producers to produce better food. And we also recently updated our vision too, and the CE put it to us. He said, "Oh, what was our previous vision?" And none of us could even remember, and I still can't now. So obviously not very effective, not powerful. This one, a bold statement, but I think that's really good. So our focus to help Aotearoa shape a better food world. And when we make decisions now, we do that. Is it on purpose? Is what we're doing going to create a better food world? And it does align with this evolving assurance landscape. Right, so I suppose to understand the growing pressures on food safety auditors, we'd first need to have a quick look at the baseline and the sort of the traditional base of a food safety auditor and what we look for in this person. So traditionally, we'd first look to qualifications and knowledge. So you'd have a relevant degree, tertiary qualification in your sector. You'd have an audit qualification. You'd have some sort of risk or HACCP training, and you'd be aware of the regulatory and standards. And what's quite important is calibration to that country's norms. So the legislation says something needs to be clean or it needs to be fit for purpose. Well, what does that mean? How clean? You have to have a procedure, what depth needs to be in that procedure, what frequencies, etc. And then you need to have technical knowledge of the products and the processes and the risks and the mitigating factors that need to be put in play for those. And then we look to what experience these auditors have. So they need to have relevant industry experience. You can't really audit a premises if you haven't worked in that sector before to see what the operational norms are. We don't want auditors going in and the pipes leaking and the site say, oh, that's normal, but it's actually not, and they don't know, and everyone has a bit of a chuckle. And it helps us walk the line as well to identify risks that maybe the operators haven't picked up on, and whether the limits and the controls, etc., the corrective actions they've put in place are effective. And then we look for experience in auditing. Something that we really focus on now is the soft skills. There's not much point in knowing the technical knowledge and being able to audit if you can't build a relationship with the auditee, the producers, get them to see that we're actually working with them and enabling them to be compliant and produce safe, suitable food rather than being the enemy we're trying to catch them out. And always like to think we're actually compliance auditors. We're not non-compliance auditors. We're always looking for compliance. And we'll ask questions, and if we can't find something to demonstrate compliance, then that's when we'll raise a non-performance. And then big ticket item is that availability to travel. Some people love it, some don't. And then on top of those baseline criteria, the auditors also need to have a good awareness of all of the usual food safety prerequisite programs. For producers, they'll generally have a manager for most of these prerequisites, an expert in site services, the laboratory looking after, say, the testing and pest pathogen. We're looking for a unicorn, a person that actually knows all of these, has had some knowledge of the guides that David just talked about on this, of the premises sides, but they also know about product development, etc. So already we're looking at quite considerable training. You can appreciate we'll probably never find someone that's going to tick all of these boxes unless we're going to be taking a quality manager out of a plant or looking for another auditor, and really we're not increasing the pool, we're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then this expertise needs to be right across the supply chain. So you'll hear the analogies farm to fork, paddock to plate. When we're auditing, you need to know about the animals, the animal remedies that they're being given, the crops, which sprays, which residues could be held over, any risks that come from the transportation to processing, what happens at processing, then the further transport, and then even in the retail and the distribution centres as well, with the risks there. So that covers the auditors. Already quite a big ask, and I haven't got to the additional bits yet. But for the agencies, so then we need to have the appropriate licenses to be able to do this work. So for the accreditations, it's used to fit on one nice tidy page for us, but they just keep growing. So I've managed to cut this down to just a couple, just to give you a snapshot of the list of accreditations we hold to be able to do the work we currently do. Oops. Right, so when we look at the demands on the food safety auditors, I sort of put it down to 3 elements here. So we've got increasing assurance demands, so they're wanting more assurances for food. At the same time, there's this continuous evolution of food and the processes too, new foods, new ways of producing them. And then a forever going battle was with that capability and capacity. So capability meaning the competency of these auditors, making sure that they've had adequate training, awareness, the knowledge, the industry experience, and then the capacity is the numbers, the geographic spread. Do we have the right people in the right place? So if I start with the increasing assurance needs, and this is primarily what I was wanting to discuss during this webinar. So traditionally, food safety and quality, you would think the regulatory requirements, so we'd do the work for the Food Safety Authority, MPI, risk management program audits, food control plan audits, and quality management, so the food safety and quality, traditional food safety audits. But as this assurance landscape has changed, there is more and more programs that are coming in that we're then adding to our checklist or giving auditors multiple checklists, giving them multiple scopes, a bit of a challenge for us. And a lot of these needs, they're not coming from AsureQuality. We don't push these requirements onto our customers. Most of the additional ones are coming from customers or customers where they're wanting assurance around something. You'll see some of these programs have AsureQuality's logo on it. It is because we've developed the scheme through demand from some of our clients, the assurances they need. Right, so on top of those traditional food safety audits, there's demand for internationally recognised programs where they're either more prescriptive, someone's got more confidence, they're more familiar with them, or it's just simply New Zealand is a small country and they don't recognise what an RMP or a food control plan, the national programs are. These programs, they do recognise. And then on top of those, we also have third-party audits too. These are just examples of some of the audits where third parties have specific food safety requirements they want us to look at on top of the regulatory requirements. And then there's also the environmental and sustainability piece, which in the last couple of years has come in very strong. A lot more demand for integrated environmental management systems and sustainability audits. Some going all out with the ISO 14000 environmental management system certification, but others wanting to incorporate those elements into their existing programs. And then new requirements coming through with Tamata Arawai, with the new water authority and the Three Waters reform with regards to on-farm environmental plans. And then there's also religious assurances as well around the halal and the kosher. And then another one coming in, social responsibility, business diversity, consumers now wanting to know that their products were ethically produced, and customers also wanting to protect their brands as well. Getting bulk ingredients in, you want to know that you're not going to end up in the media that you bought products from somewhere where they were abusing staff or they had inappropriate conditions for staff, etc. And the diversity, making sure equal opportunities and some ISO requirements around that as well. So you can start to get a picture of how many standards there are, and a lot of our clients would like to have just one auditor come on site and just one auditor, one program, one premises, and they say, oh, we don't want to pay for another audit, but you can see how many checklists this would, how many standards to keep your head around. It's very difficult. A couple of new items now. Unfortunately, we're having to do a lot more monitoring around food fraud, food defence, intentional tampering with products, substitutions of product, fish that was going overseas and coming back and we don't know that it's the same origin. So having to put in a lot more controls around that. And then health and safety, so demand for integrated quality management systems. So you want to put in the quality, the environmental, the health and safety. We're covering off the management review, the same elements. They'd rather have one auditor cover it all at once, save cost and time. And then for all of these, none of this matters if you don't have really good traceability systems in play. Can be compromised at any part of the supply chain with that substitution or adulteration of products. And then we have additional certifications that we've had requests from customers that we're now offering, so around the animal welfare, the grass-fed, organics. We've got the regenerative agriculture, and these they keep coming in, and it's really exciting. It's fun stuff for us to work with, and we can see it's really adding value to the products, and the consumers love it. But the challenge I'm talking about today is just how do we manage all this with the same sort of traditional food safety auditors. And then people need training in all of this as well, which we also offer, and usually not a better person to deliver this than an auditor that's already all over this. But so the second challenge we have is with this is continually new development of new foods and new processes, different categories of foods too. Everyone has different needs for foods. There's the convenience food, where people are wanting them to be faster, they want them tastier, they want them to last longer, more affordable. Then there's big trends for healthy foods where people want them to be healthier, the fat-free, the low salt, the low sugar, all natural, non-GE, etc. And then more and more demand now for ethical foods with certification and assurances around social practice, regenerative agriculture, wanting to purchase local to support local businesses, especially around the COVID pandemic at the moment, but also reducing carbon miles. And community good too. What is that organisation doing for their community? Are they funding things, sponsoring things? Are they employing local staff, using local contractors, etc.? And so all of this produces innovation with those producers. They're all competing with each other to try and produce these products faster than their competitors. They want it with the assurance mark on it, so they've got us vouching for it before their competitors, etc. So we're trying to keep up with new foods. Then of course there's new processes to develop those, which then come with new inherent risks, and then new treatments, the new claims, the new limits, all these sorts of things that we need to consider. And so we're doing quite a bit of training, upskilling, talking to our staff about some of these new technologies, etc., that are coming in. And just recently I was sat on a training course where we were talking about using cold plasma as a microcidal treatment for fruits and veggies. We're talking about introduction of cannabis into foods. There's just all sorts of things that we need to be considering that we never would have thought about 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. And then all of these things need to be validated and verified. And then another big ticket item is the capability capacity. So around the capability, the change is constant. We know there's always going to be changing. We're always going to be doing upskilling. There's going to be new regulations, new standards, the new foods, the new processing equipment. So it's a real challenge for us to be able to roll this out in a cost-effective manner. And also with the new generations coming through too, with high trends of employee turnover. So we've enjoyed having staff members on for 20 and 40 years service, and you can imagine the level of expertise that comes with that. You learn a lot just from being exposed to it. And our new reality could be that people will only stay in roles for say 5 to 6 years and then move on. So we need to make sure that our training is delivered more often, but it's also faster and more efficient. So our challenge is, how do you train someone in the 20 years of experience in say 1 year? And then with capacity, one of the biggest challenges for us is the food production being seasonal. Now, there's significant peaks and troughs in inspection and some really narrow production windows. If we're thinking about apiary, where someone might be extracting their honey for 2 weeks, or in the horticultural space where a crop is ready to harvest, and it's all dependent on weather and things, so we can't really plan too far ahead as to when it'll happen, and when it happens, it happens. We don't have much control over that. And then within New Zealand, there's a very limited labour pool for strong food safety staff. It's currently not really seen as a career pathway, and from what I see, people seem to fall into food safety rather than plan that as a career. And one day I'm going to be so excited when I come across a young person that wants to talk to me about becoming an auditor, and that's their plan. And so at the moment, we've got a lot of staff moving from agencies to agencies, from the industry to audits, and backwards and forwards. Bit of concern there that we don't have new blood coming in. And of course, great for us that are in the roles, but it is driving up demand for those people, driving up salaries, driving up costs of compliance for the operators. Right, so now looking at potentially what we could do better, and this is thinking on this call, we've got the greatest minds in food safety in New Zealand, and I would really like to continue this discussion, so please reach out to me at the end of this presentation. I've got my contact details there, but I figure we've got producer stakeholders, standard owners, etc. on the line. How could we manage these assurance demands better? Is integrated audits the answer? Should we be trying to put all of these standards into one checklist, have that one premises, one program, one auditor? Or is that too much? Or is there effective ways of doing that if we had a IT software-based platform where all standard owners could put their requirements in? Maybe a bit of a dream, but you think of ma and pa dairy farm or horticultural grower, they're not experts in quality and compliance, and they don't monitor these websites as we do. And so how do we get the information to them? It would be great if there could be one platform where all standard owners put their requirements on, so they can see the environmental, the resource consents, their food safety, health and safety, everything that they need to do is their real proactive approach, so that we're basically making those requirements transparent. It's being proactive about them complying rather than a lag indicator of an auditor coming in afterwards and telling them they haven't met something that they actually weren't aware of. So the other question I have is, are we spreading ourselves too thin? Do we need to specialise, send more auditors on separate audits and just really focus on those certain elements? Obviously there's cost considerations there. It's going to cost more, but something we definitely have to consider. And probably a contentious topic is whether we could increase collaboration. There's a lot of these standards are very similar, and potentially we could get together and discuss what could be deemed equivalent and get some more acceptance of other standards. Look to see what is actually missing from the regulatory minimums, or what's missing from someone else's standard. And another question I have is around the focus versus details. With our checklist, are we trying to cover too much? If we've got 100-page checklists and we're trying to keep costs down, we've got the food auditors on the trot, they're trying to cover so much, would we be better cutting those right back and just really focusing on critical matters? Last year, I became aware of a situation where an auditor was being assessed, and a food safety auditor, and they spent the whole day in the plant and they were covering off all these bits and pieces, and at the end they were asked what was the plant producing, and they hadn't even noticed what product was being made. So it's a real concern. Right, so looking at this continued evolution of foods too, so I suppose we can't even look at the supermarket now to think what foods are there, because what's our food going to look like in 10 or 20 years time? I hear stories in 50 years time, half our food might be coming from algae, and there's going to be new digestible proteins, potentially proteins that we're wearing at the moment might be digested and we eat it. Will that production actually still be seasonal? So we'll be able to break down some of those seasonal peaks and spread out our workloads. I always get in trouble with my team when I suggest that global warming is not actually really a bad thing. If we can extend our growing season, it just gives a bit more time to get the work done. So would this production be done indoors and outdoors? Is it going to be out in the field, or is it going to be produced in labs? And of course, there's different risks that we need to be aware of there. And then how do we keep up with our product and process, our risk knowledge? Even from my time in the dairy sector, so much has changed, and I've been out, I'm now a food auditor. How do we get time back in the plants to really get to understand what these risks are, be in the plant, see the things that David was talking about earlier around these real risks? I did originally have this as a question, but I changed it thinking, no, it's absolutely essential, is that industry engagement, the consultation to get their trends and their insights, whether the legislation, whether these standards are actually working. And I'm thinking with regards to keeping up competencies, whether we should really have a collaborative type approach to where audit bodies take in staff and we put them through our auditor academies and we train them in the regulations and our calibration and where all these outcomes come from. But in turn, we can put staff back into factories and spend time working and getting to know some of these real risks. And then when we look at the capability capacity piece, thinking, do we need more people? We're always struggling to keep auditors, but then again, we need to look into the future. What is auditing going to look like in 10 years? And with this pandemic, we're now doing a lot of audits remotely, or we're doing hybrid audits where we do half of it remotely and the other half on site. So could we do it with less people? Are we going to do it more efficiently? Are we going to implement software-based systems, computer templates where they prompt the operators what records they need to keep? It tells them when they're out of spec or whether they haven't done something. It's time stamped. We know who did it. It only allows certain people that are authorized, so they have the right approvals to action something. Could computers take away a lot of the challenge work that we need to do, a lot of the leg work? My personal opinion is there's always going to be a requirement for on-site assessments for the inspection side, the smells, the humidity, the bits and pieces that the technology is definitely not even close to being able to cover yet. And then how do we increase the capability of our staff? And I'm thinking not just the food audit staff, but also the sector staff, production staff, the food safety personnel, and just as important as the executives and the directors. The governance groups, they'll be well trained in finance and health and safety and things that matter, but are they suitably competent in food safety? And they are the ones that are ultimately making those big decisions. And then when I look to see where this training comes from, it seems to be from within sectors or from audit bodies delivering it. I did another scan checking 10 years ago when I was going through university and looking at some of the studies I did. We didn't cover the legislation in any great detail. And I thought that was really quite strange. It's surely compliance is a requirement of just about any job that you do these days. Part of your due diligence, if you're on the financial side, to understand the cost of it and your responsibilities. But for most, you do have an involvement in it. You need to take records, you're involved in management reviews, etc. And so I think this is something that that we should be pushing hard, and we're already talking with quite a few education providers about incorporating these compliance elements into most qualifications. And then the career pathways piece. How do we bring the sexy back to auditing? The salaries are quite good, the opportunities are quite good, the job security is there. People always need to eat, but it just doesn't seem to be something that people are looking at. And so I was quite excited when I was sent this link. So GFSI having a good look at the food safety auditor qualification and the food auditor profession. So I'll definitely be joining this webinar, and I would highly recommend it to others next week. The time difference isn't great, but I think it would be very beneficial. So I love what they're proposing to cover off. So that, what is that competence? How do you actually measure that? And then I would love to hear what GFSI are thinking about. What is this establishing a profession for food safety auditing? Exciting stuff. Okay, so as I said at the start, very keen to engage with whoever wants to be involved in trying to progress this. I think probably most people on the call would need to have some involvement in some way, and my contact details there, based in Christchurch. Really happy to talk to anyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I don't think we all recognise sometimes the depth of knowledge that auditors have to have. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. We have no